All right, welcome back. I hope you got your carbs, your proteins, and ready for two wonderful sessions this afternoon. It'll definitely get your juices flowing. Continuous improvement. So I have the privilege of introducing Mark. Mark Rukovich, Vice President of Quality at Innovise. And he will give the keynote today for continuous improvement from a participant's point of view in the VIP program. So, Mark, it's my pleasure.
Thanks, Paul.
Thanks, man.
Thank you all. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the Innovise experience. I've been in the med device industry 35 years, large manufacturers, small manufacturers, all different kinds of products in those different manufacturers. And so we look at, I was here in 2014 and 2015 at the beginning of this program, and we were looking at implementing this, maturity model, and we said, what is this? And they had just selected CMMI as the maturity model when I got involved. And I had shown this slide at that meeting to a couple people at CMMI, and they went, yes, that's sort of the question we're at. What's the definition of quality when you're trying to do an improvement? I mean, so we're talking quality is it compliance to requirements, and what's typically a lot of people think about, warning, how compliant they are, and they want to get to the point where you don't want to get into wasteful compliance, but you want to be compliant or bulletproof. And in the upper corner, in the lower right corner, you don't want to be really there, though, wasteful. And I've seen a lot of organizations where you're spending a lot of time to be compliant. This was different. So this was a concept. I showed this. We really want to do continuous improvement. And that's up the left side. And I was thinking about CMMI when I created this slide before even I knew about the program. And it's like, we want to get up to the upper. We haven't got up the upper right. A lot of organizations start in the lower left when you're new. But if you're compliant to the FDA regs, you're usually pretty good. But how do we get up into that upper corner? And so I was involved with this program early on. I volunteered Innovise, which is a contract manufacturer. A little different, a little less risk also to take because we don't have devices to get approved by the FDA. We're just supplying it to our customers. And this is where I think Innovise was at the time. We were compliant, we were FDA registered, we were making finished devices, but not our own. And so how did we wanted to get better. So back in 2016, we started the process, and what actually happened, I was at Innovise since 2013. In 2016, we had an FDA QSIT inspection, and no findings. Little did I know that was going to be one of the requirements as we got into the proof of concept and the pilot. So we volunteered to be in the proof of concept. And so this was with Becky Fitzgerald from Two Harbor, George's associate, and Visma Carter came to Innovise. And FDA wanted to see what this was like. So we've actually had the Skype going so before Zoom, so it was a little more difficult to get the video working. And it was about a day-long process we were going through. And I'm going to show you some of the results of all this, of the assessments and how it affected us over the years. So FDA was watching this, and actually I talked to Bleda, and she was watching this at the time too. I think Cisco probably was watching it too. And what the assessment was basically looking at two areas. We just looked at configuration management, requirements management, using the version 1.3 of the model. It's at 2.0 now, it's going to 3.0, and we were looking at just level 2 assessments. So that was sort of, what was this going to be like? I'm used to a little more control in FDA inspections, but I'm actually a little more proactive. I try to design the system so that I don't need a back room necessarily to do an inspection. But so this was going to be different. And so Visma and Becky then came back, and this was what the results were from the couple different areas that we were looking at. Requirements management and configuration management. There was P's, practices are partially addressed. There was only a couple of S's there, so satisfactory, and D. And we knew this going in. I mean, we were in a contract manufacturer where we didn't have good change control. We knew that we were improving. We were going to be putting in a new ERP system to implement change control significantly. Little did we know that This was done in June. Our ERP system went live in August, and the pilot was in October. So actually, we can look at what happened between these two times, and it was just coincidence. All this stuff happened this year, in the year 2016. So our overall numbers, we knew we needed work, and that was a lot of the discussions that we had. And the discussions we had were basically with managers and stuff in the organization. Not a lot of the executives weren't involved, and people on the floor weren't involved. So then in the pilot that we done in October, so the first pilot, there was 3 organizations involved, Innovyze, CVRX, and I think Stryker. I'm not sure, remember the third. And these are the areas that were covered. And so this is 1.3 of the model, so it's a little different. Requirements management, project planning, measurement and control, supplier agreement, quality, configuration management, I forgot, materials. So the different areas. So what you see here, as we were looking at the process, the requirements management and configuration management that we did, the numbers increased significantly because we had put better change control in place. And we could show that with a continuous improvement project, you can actually see the results in the assessments. And that was very valuable, and it's like we were talking about that on the governing committees, that this looks really good, and some of the other areas. This version 1.3 of the model has changed a lot. Those areas of generic practices are now separate practice areas in governance and infrastructure. But this is really a helpful tool, and it's like, yeah, we're gonna keep doing this. And we felt it was adding a lot of value, having a third party come in and ask us questions about how we're doing it. And even at this point, we were still just having basically the management and the owners of the business processes involved in the assessments. So a year later, now the official pilot's going on in December. This was in December, and this is using 2.0 of the model. We're looking pretty good here, and this is only going to level 2. So the level 2 levels, numbers look really good. It's like, well, what do you do next? Well, we should go up to level 3 and have them assess to that level. More questions being asked. So this was really good. And this is same thing. This group is looking at a lot of managers involved, managers, director levels involved in the assessment. And so time to step up our game a little bit. So in 2018 through 2020, we decided to go to level 3. We wanted to drop some practice areas that we know we were good at, because like you can't cover all the areas. You can't keep adding more and more because the assessment's going to take longer and longer. So we removed some areas that we thought we were pretty good at. One of the areas, though, I just want to go back for a second. The top line there, estimating. So when I looked at some of the results in 2017 across the industry, they had some industry compiled results. Innovyze had done pretty well on estimating. That's because we're a contract manufacturer, and that's all we do. We quote our customers all the time, every day. First, I was in a finished medical device manufacturer, and it's like, cost accounting does the pricing on the parts and stuff, and most organizations don't. But in estimating, it also includes stuff about project estimating and some of those activities. A lot of medical device manufacturers didn't rate really high in estimating. So that was something that was a thing that we had talked about in the governing committee too. But that hasn't been a driver, and actually today that's not one of the key focus areas, practice areas of the assessments. So then, so in 2018, 2020, we did those areas. I'm going to show you the results of all this. And then Becky came back when we were going to do 2021. She said, what's going to add more value? Versus just like, well, we're going to go to level 3, and then we should go to level 4. It's like, no, what area is going to add value to your organization? And so we were doing scheduling. As a contract manufacturer, we don't know what our customers' demands are. We get POs. We don't have long-term contracts. We have hundreds of manufacturers, and our numbers go up and down every month. It's not very consistent. So scheduling on the production floor became a little more complicated with hundreds and hundreds of parts to schedule on different machines. And in 2022, we continued scheduling and capacity planning because of all the machines we understand with the scheduling. And this year, we're looking at process adherence. just sort of. And one of the things we also did, starting in like 2019 and 2020, we started going deeper. Well, we also went up. So in like 2019, the executive team, the entire executive team was there for the governance. So we privately held company. The owners were there in the meeting. And they saw it as a real value. I mean, the first time they did it, they're like, why am I doing this? They weren't sure. But they found that the value was it helps focus areas. And so what we ended up doing is moving it in 2020, to have it about a month before our annual strat planning. So they can think about this kind of stuff for strategic planning for the next year. So we got the senior management involved across in the governance sections. And then we also went down. We went deeper into the organization, leads on the production floor, we're in the assessments, like, I'm not in these kind of meetings. I'm not in. So we got them calmed down, and they were in there, and they're asking questions because it's more of their peers. And then as we went into scheduling and capacity planning and process adherence this year, we're focusing the groups differently. So instead of just trying to say, you're going to focus on this, we said, let's just have one group just be production people. And they're asking these questions on scheduling or capacity planning. So it's just sort of changing our focus instead of just trying to use the same model every time and going either deeper or more focused. And so what you'll see in the results, this was 2016 through 2022 results. So as you can see, the first 1.3 level, that's the proof of concept, and then 1.3 again, the second column is the pilot. And then you said we did really well at 2.0 2.0, but level 2, green. As we go to 3.0, higher level of requirements, numbers dropped. That was expected. I mean, we were talked about that in the governing committee, that kind of thing would probably happen because you're being held to a higher standard. And then bumped up in 2019, it was sort of flat really between those years. We were doing the new ERP system. We were adding more stuff into it, integrating it more. 2020, things turned around a bit. The focus numbers looked really good, and then we decided to stop doing some areas like in estimating in 2020. We stopped. We said that's doing well enough for what we're looking for. And then we added new areas. We focused on other practice areas that include service delivery, service management, organizational training, and supplier agreement management. And then as we did the focused scheduling and the focused capacity planning, we changed around numbers again. And so we're just sort of a way of looking at this. So it's not a one-size-fits-all. You constantly change and adapt to your organization. Like I remember when we were on the one conference call in the governing committee about how we want to implement this, and Cisco said, this is about continuous improvement. This is not about getting to a level. And I went, oh, this is great. So then you're always on a continuous journey. And it's like, yes, so this is what we are doing. We're on a continuous journey, focusing on areas that really need improvement. Now the question is, once you start getting and you feel that your areas are very controlled and you want to move up, you can look at higher levels, levels 4 and 5. I think Innovize is currently moving up the chain here on this process. But to really get to the highest levels of 4 and 5, I mean, we're not being assessed to CMMI 4. And that's going to get into level 4, really gets into some discussions we had on metrics management. How do you manage the metrics? I mean, each organization, each group and process can say, these are my metrics, but how do you consistently manage those metrics and look at them so everybody has it? And then is all the senior management, as these strategic planning, aligned with the metrics? Is that tied in with your quality management reviews and other things? Is that all linked up? And then to get to level 5, senior management has to be totally bought in. At this point, you're making proactive decisions with your metrics, and the senior executive management team is using strategic planning, using the metrics that are being managed. And so really get to level 4 and 5, it's buy-in across the organization. I mean, that's really what you have to get to get there at higher levels. You don't have to go there. You just want a continuous improvement. And organizations are large, and there's lots of issues you can see in organizations. So that's sort of my history of the MDAP program, CMMI VIP program. Over the years, it's been a very fun journey, a lot of learning. I'm very focused on that. I really like the concept of what it is and what it does. I've seen that in the past organizations. I've seen many organizations that just stop and don't do continuous improvement. And I want to keep organizations going. And this is a great program that can be incentivized by the FDA to get into it. So I'd like to thank the entire team and this group that's also going to be talking about the panel. Over the years, have done a really good job. So thanks.
This would be the largest panel that in these 2 days.
Are we filling up from that side?
Still coming out.
Where are you going?
I don't know. Number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I guess. Anything particular?
There, George, okay.
You got it? All right, Ron Becker.
Okay, thank you. So it's actually a privilege to be here and get started with the esteemed panel here. But I just wanted to make a few remarks. It should be an exciting year for the Volunteer Improvement Program. We are expecting the formal notification in the Federal Register. And with that comes some additional opportunities to, do things like apply 30-day notice benefits to CAPA, FCA, and other changes that have currently been sort of excluded. So I'm continuing that. And then also the program has 3 active working groups for, sustaining adoption and expansion that are continuing to look at ways to improve the program, make changes, and iterate as we go forward. And it's nice to be here today. Just in 2016, we were actually here in this room in November, and that was right after the site that I participated in with Edwards Life Sciences was the first formal appraisal that was done as part of the program. And so I was able to come share the experience of, yes, this is definitely a very different approach to engaging an organization. And I'd say that, over the years, we've continued to find value in the program. We've extended the program to all of our manufacturing sites worldwide. And, we think it's a great balance of letting companies, have some autonomy on what they look at, but getting feedback and continuing to have that continuous improvement mindset. So with that, we'll get started. And this may be more from some of the industry participants. And I think between Brian, Cindy, Ravi, if you guys want to chime in, but maybe start down there with Mark, just because he, for his fantastic keynote. But what areas related to the medical device quality, safety, and patient outcomes does the Case for Quality Collaborative Communities Voluntary Improvement Program, I love working in this because we get such big names, target for improvement going forward beyond regulatory compliance?
Oh, what we should look on beyond regulatory compliance. It was interesting that on the Baldrige Award too, it's like, where do you want to go going forward? I mean, the model takes you with the program improving it, but I think some ways of how do we, somehow show that it's cost benefit. I mean, it's better ROI for the whole organization, better planning, and almost proactively with your metrics, and that's part of the program too, is collecting some of the metrics. How do we improve that so that actually show even better improvement, that by following the program you can get into better organization deliverables and improvements in costs and profitability.
All right, Cindy, how about you?
Okay, sure. First of all, I want to commend the FDA CDRH for this whole program and the Case for Quality. I mean, all the aspects of the Case for Quality is just great to have this collaboration and continuous collaboration for just kind of the ongoing efforts we're doing. So it's been a great program and love it. Yeah, beyond the regulatory compliance, I mean, there's so many things that you start looking at. Some of the CMMI model has things like estimating and planning around projects, but for products, we do that really well. Our product risk is really well, our product estimation and scheduling is really good, but then you look at, okay, are you doing it for other processes in your company, so the business processes and all that. So you start to really expand your, looking at all business, processes throughout the whole business versus just in the regulatory, the quality system regulation. So it's really expanded the areas that we're looking for and how we do that. And with some of the 30-day notice, benefits and all that, we've been able to minimize a lot of supply chain issues. We've been able to react to them faster because our processes are better. And then the faster, 30-day notice. And so with COVID, everybody had supply chain issues. And we really were able to minimize that well. So I think that was good. And what they're talking about, the metrics, doing that, meeting our schedules better. And I think just better alignment across the organization. So we have really clear communication now of, here's our goals and what we need to do. And all departments are aligned versus different departments doing different priorities and working on their own agenda. So that's been great there. And then the other big change, I think, is usually process improvement is kind of a sidebar for most of us. And it's something you just think, okay, I want to do this, I want to fix this. But now we're actually having cross-functional meetings on what are these process improvements we need to make? What is this continuous improvement? What are the ones that are going to benefit us the most? And we have those discussions, and they become prioritized projects in the company. So it's just been a huge change for our culture and what we're doing.
Okay, thanks. And Brian, how about your perspectives?
Well, for us, I'm going to sound a little bit like a broken record, I think, but it's all about continuous improvement. So when we got involved with the program, which is now 4 years ago, we didn't do it for the regulatory benefits, and it wasn't. We didn't look at it as a compliance tool because it's not. It's a continuous improvement tool and program. So for us, it's all about, on the more traditional quality system element stuff, on effectiveness, on efficiency of process, being able to do things without waste, being able to really get as much value as we can out of the quality management system. But we've started looking at it from beyond the sort of the traditional quality approach. So 2 years ago, we got involved elements of finance, human resources, IT, because the elements of the model they're not compliance focused, right? So they're about operational excellence and continuous improvement. So there's just the whole thing is we always think about it as beyond compliance, even when we first got into it.
Okay, and Ravi, how about you? What are your experiences with the program?
I think this program has been extremely valuable in actually enabling quality as opposed to compliance, in the sense that it's helped with defect reduction. But it's really not so much beyond as it is, what's the opposite of beyond? It's like an iceberg. So 10% of it is above the water, but 90% is below. And there's so many things that go into that below that enable, quality to occur at the top, that these elements that we've put in place with the program, they actually build infrastructure. It's like the foundation. So in a sense, it's kind of not so much beyond for me as it is enabling the foundation, all the things that everyone here talked about, that then let the organization work more effectively together, collaborating cross-functionally to deliver quality in the sense of defect reduction and ultimately betterment for the patient or the clinician.
Good, thank you. So this is more for Cisco and for Kim, but you two have both been longtime, really observers for the program and also very influential in how the programs move forward. But you're also representing outside of industry the different main roles in the program through what you're seeing. So what have you seen through the industry's participation in terms of what some of the benefits have been and some of the positive outcomes? And have you seen anything, there were initial concerns, maybe in terms of, well, if we don't do compliance, then companies are going to lose their way, et cetera. So have you seen any of the negative outcomes? What's your assessment of observations as we're, 7 years into the formal rollout?
Do you want to start?
I can start. So, originally when we started, a lot of the Case for Quality works really started the journey and the focus on continuous improvement. We knew somewhere this was directionally correct, and that was based on a lot of the feedback and how things were developed right to begin with. But when we talk about the things that we have learned, very quickly, right? It was one of those things where once we start looking at things away from just the normal compliance lens, focus on the items that people were delivering just to kind of check the box and meet what their expectation of us was, we really started to see, where systemically, I think just the evolution of things over the last several decades in that approach and mindset had driven things, right? That's the birthplace of the Kappa pilot, right? It's not only the frustration that industry was seeing, but us within even the first few companies, we could see a distinct pattern that, challenged our way of thinking. So, one of the things that I really reiterate all the time when we go through these discussions is every opportunity, every bit of data, every information sharing set. And Marco, thank you for always being very transparent with your data. Because we learn from it and we see, is this really achieving the end result that we as an agency wanted to get to? And is this actually achieving the result that industry, set forth to really get their piece rolling? So it's that evolution of information. It's what's the next piece that we've got to tackle, the broader collaboration. Now, do things go right all the time? Is everything perfect? No, it doesn't, right? A continuous improvement journey is that process. It's the learning, the iteration. We've seen companies be very responsive and a lot more transparent when things do occur. We've seen them actually move in the direction of the broader, more systemic improvements versus just trying to deal with an observation that they've got, right? Which is huge. But we still have situations, and you'll see it. I think I loved a lot of what was set up here, where you see a lot more integration of the quality system elements beyond where we always focus, which is just the QMS, because all these areas have a huge influence on how that process delivers. But we still see sometimes companies who do have struggles and issues, and when you pinpoint it, it's never really what's going on in the QMS. It's really well controlled. Something else is going on, and that's where we still have to take, from our standpoint, some action or engagement with the organization. So that still happens. I think the more companies start to broaden beyond just the quality management system and start to look into that broader integration piece, the more some of that goes away, right? And that's part of their individual journey. I think we'd like to encourage that as quickly as possible, but it is very much relevant to their journey, and you can't rush it. And we've seen some of that. It kind of drives behavior in the other direction.
Kim, how about your thoughts?
Yeah, happy to add to that. Just as a reminder, I'm Kim Kaplan, Senior Product Manager at ISACA, and we help by providing the CMMI framework upon which the VIP program is based, which helps organizations better understand, measure, and improve their capability to deliver high-quality products. And so I think when FDA launched the case for quality, it was really aligned with what we were seeing in broader CMMI, which historically has leveraged maturity levels to determine an organization's maturity. And what we saw is when we're using the model in this sort of compliance approach, we see organizational behaviors that tend to hide problems in order to achieve that level. And so we knew coming into this program that was going to be one of our challenges, is how do we leverage this model in a way that's different to show organizations that this is a unique approach in order to build that dialogue, that trust, that transparency. And so actually it was a great confluence of times because we had just released the 2.0 model to what Mark was saying earlier, which allowed for greater flexibility in how the model was adopted. So I think those were some of our earlier challenges, is really figuring out how do we change this approach, how do we modify it to have that openness and really identify the real issues that have a direct and indirect impact to product quality. I think in terms of changes that we've seen, we hear like once you're done with the first appraisal, now you're ready for an appraisal, because organizations understand and believe in what we're doing because we actually did what we said we would. And so some of the things we start to see are really around like the culture of quality. So really shifting that mindset towards continuous improvement, away from tactical thinking towards strategic thinking, and really understanding that every individual in the organization contributes to the quality of the organization and the products.
Just to add something there was just something that I think I've appreciated with the model's approach, the way the appraisal gets performed, the company's commitment around things, and you guys could share otherwise. But typically from what we see at FDA, we'll see some information come in, we'll see an observation, we'll see just patterns or trends through the MDR reports, and in the background, you're like, wow, that seemed like a really poor decision on leadership's part. Why did they go that route? What's going on there? But as we've been engaged through this activity, what we've seen is actually leadership wants to help drive and support the right decisions, right? If they're just getting the right information set. And we've seen a lot more of that, I guess, the right information getting up into the leadership hand to help drive that cultural change. Right? I think everybody's willing to support it. It's just really what's the right place to start from and where to go from there. And I've seen that shift in a lot of the participants and their companies. But from our side, prior to having this other information set, this other mechanism, it was always a question of, well, what the hell's going on with that site? What's going on there? Why are they making those kind of decisions?
Okay, thank you. So Brian, I'll start with you on this one. One of the benefits of the VIP is that it has flexibility in terms of what your organization chooses to focus on and allows you to be a little more adaptive about your approach. And I'm just curious, how have you used it, used that flexibility, and what kinds of things have you focused on to help your organization improve?
Maybe I'll start with the second part and then come back to the flexibility one. So when we first looked at the program, we had a lot of the conversation around where do we start? What sort of, where do we start to look? For us, new product introduction, we're a big engineering type company. We grow completely organically, 12 to 15% a year. So new product introduction is basically what we're all about. So we looked at it from what opportunities, and we're a relatively small company, so we've got half of our manufacturing in Auckland, New Zealand. We've got another half in Mexico. Where have we got opportunities to be able to kind of correct and improve upon the synergies that we'd like to have between those process steps? So we initially went, okay, it's good for us to focus on product development, design transfer, getting things set up effectively and efficiently. And through sort of looking at it like that, we started, I guess, on the right foot because we started identifying some things through the appraisal process that were not things that we had to do, but they're things that we wanted to get better at to begin with. So it kind of set us off on the right foot. The appraisal process, now maybe I'll touch on the second part, how that was done, I think was as impactful to kind of starting off on the right step as it was just the learnings that we gained from it. So our lead appraiser, it wasn't about just cramming the model down us, and it wasn't about things that we aren't doing well within the model. The approach that she took was using the model, understanding what was important to us as an organization, and then being able to drive continuous improvement that way. So is the program we found to be quite flexible in that regard, in that it's not, and we had a little bit of apprehension about this. I think we had to just experience, you have to go through the first one to get to the real appraisal. But we were somewhat apprehensive just to begin with, truthfully speaking, around, is this, we don't have any aspiration to be great at the model. We wanted to use the model to get great at what we think we need to be great at. So the program is quite flexible in that regard, at least in our experience, that it hasn't been just all about the model. It's been really trying to understand what we want to get better at and using the model as sort of a guide.
Okay, Ravi, how about your thoughts? I mean, you've actually tried to bring, or you've represented this program in a couple of organizations.
Yeah, I think, Rob, the beauty of the program lies in the flexibility that it offers in allowing us to pick the areas that we want to either get better at or want to expand beyond the initial 11 elements. I'll give you an example. when we did this first implementation and we got a fairly good passing score, and we came up for the second iteration, we had to decide if we wanted to up the capability level within the existing elements or expand beyond what we were already capable in. And we kind of decided to do both. So for example, supplier account management was not a part of the initial 11, and we added that on because we felt we needed to supplement and strengthen that area. Whereas in some of the other areas, we just chose to try to get to a higher level of capability. So I think that's kind of an example of how that helped us in both ways, expanding as well as deepening.
Yeah, great. Cindy,
Sure.
about your perspective?
Yeah, I think, for us it was similar to what Robbie described, but it's, you started out, we wanted to get as many coverage across the model, as many areas as we could to kind of really get the foundationals in and see where we had gaps. And then from that, we, met as mentioned, what are those things that we really need to fix and get better at to improve our business? We kept doing that. So certain things we went up levels and did that to just get better because we really needed to improve in those areas. And then other ones, we just got the foundational and then kind of just added on that. So it really helped us get broader across and really think differently about it. Because as I said, the case for quality, you're looking at compliance normally, and now you're having an expanse. You really have to look through the whole area of the business. So it definitely expanded a lot in that area. So.
Okay. And Mark, how about you? You've been through several iterations and really, had a long span of time to help hone your thoughts on this.
Yeah, so like I was stating in the in my talk that we are doing the same thing. I mean, basically, diving deep into very specific areas and or going into different areas, or going to very focused. That is not really part of the model, but we needed to improve this business process. And I think earlier Cisco said something about systems, and that's the thing about this is it's system thinking, that it's even outside of the quality system. And I just read a book on systems thinking and social change by David Stroh, and in there he said, the system gets better when you make sure the interactions work between the objects versus trying to improve each of the objects independently in an organization. So the interaction between everything, and so that's the interaction of a quality system with finance and HR. That's why organizational training and governance is all really important. And so that's why I think the system view of this, and so then because you have a system view, you can then really fix certain areas that aren't even part of the model. Like scheduling is not in the model, but that we're focusing on that because it's complicated because I have no good forecasting. So that's I think that's allowing us some flexibility there. I mean, we're focusing on it for other reasons, but it actually came out as part of the discussions during our assessments.
So we've got a virtual question, so I'll kind of direct this to Kim and George. But how does the model look at the organization culture and more specifically culture of quality?
Sure, I can take it on first at a high level, and then I think you can maybe.
Can we
provide
agree, like,
some-
all questions go to Cisco? Go ahead, Kim.
So I think especially when the 2.0 version of the model came out, we introduced two practice areas that I think really support this: governance and implementation infrastructure. And so governance is really all about engaging leadership in the organization, making sure that they're setting the strategic priorities, that they're communicating that down to the teams, the departments, the individuals, that they're making sure that goals align across the organization. Everyone knows how what they're doing helps achieve organizational goals. And then implementation infrastructure is all about making sure that you're providing staff with the resources, the training, funds, skills in order to actually create the processes that they need to accomplish those goals and deliver against them. So I think those two things combined have really enabled the model to look more at organizations' culture. And I think we've seen that kind of anecdotally in our post-appraisal surveys. That's one of the big themes we see coming out of our assessments, is how looking at the organization through the lens of the CMMI framework helps address culture.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, as a CMMI appraiser, in addition to leveraging those two practice areas, which are about have you set up leadership and the implementation infrastructure for persistence and habit of any particular process, there's a couple things that we also do from a method perspective, which may seem intuitive, but I think it's really what sets up for successful appraisals. One, when orienting any appraisal team, the first principle that we're always talking about is how we're going to provide value back to the site. Right? So be it we're looking at a product that one of these sites is producing, or a process, we're looking at their transfer process, a project, how we're going to provide value back to that. That's very much deep in the mindset of the appraisal team. Then we also will set up interviews, and again, this might seem very obvious to you, but we talk about there being non-attribution and confidentiality in every interview. So what that means is if I'm in an interview with all these folks, we say, hey, look, because we want everybody to be transparent and looking to improve your own organization, you can talk about the concepts that we talk about in here outside the room, but we're not going to attribute that Robbie said this or that Rob said that ever, because we want them to feel safe in being able to do that. So they're more likely to talk about opportunities for improvement or where they're performing at a higher capability. That'll also allow us to start to get at certain cultural type of issues. If there are things that are great from the organization, hey, I can bring I as a line worker, I can stop the line. Or I can't because I feel a pressure to produce, right? Those sorts of cultural issues will start to come out in our interview techniques. Yep, there are some organizations that are going to approach us. They're going to have their arms crossed a little bit more. They're going to be a little bit more tight-lipped about that. But part of the goal of the appraisal team is to get the organizations to open up so that we can provide that sort of feedback. Additionally, as a lead appraiser, and I know I've learned this from other appraisers, from our method perspective, we challenge the appraisal team not just to provide appraisal results like just against Gov and II and the specific practices, right? But hey, if you were running this organization come Monday, what would you want to continue to do? And what would you absolutely want to tackle? So that gives us the opportunity to pivot into potentially cultural issues if we see those as well. And I think it really sets us up to then come back to the executive team and say, these are your results, but these are also cultural things that we saw. Keep doing this, think about changing that, stop changing that. So while we don't have necessarily the same sort of checklist of every single cultural attribute, we have some by way of the practices, but our methods also allow us to start to do some detection of cultural activities and the culture of quality at an organization.
Great. Well, let me stick with you, George.
Okay.
We talked a little bit about the flexibility for an organization in terms of how they approach the appraisal. What does that look like from an appraiser standpoint, and what are some of the successful things you've seen where you see that work out well in terms of how companies really think about and use that flexibility to their benefit?
Yeah, so I think you heard it from these folks here. They, typically an organization will come and they'll want to talk about their products to start. Hey, these are our flagship products. We feel like that we're doing great. Use the CMI model to assess these. We want to show you how great we are in those areas. As we open up the conversation, though, again, we're looking to where can we provide value? So we start looking at what are the processes, what are the projects that might also be impactful to you? Rob, what are your pain points at your organization in which you might get some value if you had a third party looking at this? So that starts to allow us to provide that flexibility. Again, typically in first year, we're looking at these 11 elements that are defined by the program, and we're typically looking at products. But I've had the opportunity, some of these organizations I've gone to for 6 years. I've worked with a sterilization organization, for example, for 6 years. We've looked at their gamma sterilization batch irradiator quite a lot. At some point, we've shifted that to say, okay, can we look at the processes that support that? Because maybe how one of their customers comes in and gets to understand what levels of radiation are necessary or their product packaging, we start to look at that from being flexible in the scope of the appraisal. And then we can also play on the model side, as was said here. We can look at different practice areas. We can flex those to different levels. I know we're talking here a lot about VIP, the Voluntary Improvement Program. There's also been a pilot called Accelerating Sustainable Capability. That's been for organizations. So to be a part of VIP, you have to be an organization that's in good compliance standing with the agency. This is a pilot program that was put out for organizations that may have how do I say it, like less than a stellar compliance history. They may be dealing with a warning letter or a 43,
challenges, it's
or they might even have said, we want to self-enroll into that particular program, right? So that was all about flexibilities, right? We had one organization say, hey, look, our warning letter is all about CAPA. Can you look at our CAPA processes from top to bottom? So that ended up being, like, we looked at like 14 different practice areas at different levels all around their CAPA. And again, what was it about? It was to provide value back to the site. So, you know, for me as an appraiser, that's part of the fun of it, that puzzle of working with the organization to understand, yeah, I know you're strong over here, but where can we provide value? How do we flex to understand that on your side of the table from a scope perspective? And then how do then we align the model practices and to what level to provide the best feedback to the organization?
So George, that segues well into one of the other questions we had, which is, you know, as far as what we've established through, you know, the VIP program, how does that relate to the ASC program, and what are you learning differently from the ASC program? And maybe this is more for Kim and for Cisco in relation to how the appraisal process applies to maybe some companies that have more challenging issues.
So I can tell you that for the most part, what we've tried to do is be engaged, make sure the ground rules are there for ASC. But we're trying to kind of maintain the oversight, but keep hands off. That was part of our commitment, right? For those firms who are willing to share and come forward and kind of take that bold step and tell us, we think we've got a problem. You know, we're looking for help. Here's a mechanism to do it. So, you know, the details around that don't have that yet. What we have seen is the organizations, because there is as part of it, there is a requirement, right, to share and be open about what's happening to that degree. There's a lot that the organizations kind of recognize and say, we know we have a problem here, somewhere in this area. Don't know exactly what it is. Don't know, you know, we've been working in systemic, we get these observations, we've been tackling these observations, doesn't seem to be making a difference. And that we've seen the appraisal team tackle that and really zero in and focus on those practices that are best suited for getting out or identifying what's driving at that issue. So it's been, at least from our look and see and what little I get back and look at, a much better value proposition for them, right? Because it goes back to the notion of what we've heard up here lots of times. It's focus, right? Sometimes you just improve one very key area and a lot of other things just dramatically improve along with it. So that's a bit of what we're seeing. We're hoping to see that play out more when we get the final assessments and the results through ASC. But the two pieces I think that we've learned so far is, again, the value of the more targeted, very directed feedback, and then you know, flexibility and in the engagement. And I think the appraisers do a very good job of continuously working with the organization to hit those broader business objectives, right? Without, it's like the idea of, we get it, we've got this compliance issue here, we got it. Let's not focus on that for the second. Let's focus on what are the big systemic things that will help drive the improvement, and that kind of takes care of everything else along the way.
Yeah, I'll add, I think one of the key objectives of this pilot study is to see if we could help sites address areas of compliance they wanted to focus on more sustainably. I think, you know, that's something we heard with the launch of the case for quality, is that a lot of sites that were compliant were facing kind of repeat issues and similar kinds of issues as non-compliant sites. So how do we help them address their compliance issue in a way so that there's a lower likelihood of recurrence of the same issue or a tangential issue? And so I think one of the things we're doing in this program too, or in this pilot study, is allowing them the space to really look holistically and systemically at their organization and try to think more strategically about what solution will address not just the compliance issue at hand, but more broadly. And so I think that's one of the things we're doing here. I think we've learned with almost every pilot appraisal that we've delivered, every checkpoint, you know, we're learning and adjusting. I think we had a certain set of required practice areas at the beginning, and we quickly learned that was quite a lot to tackle, so we had to change kind of the tier structure and allow a little bit more flexibility. I think at the beginning we were really focused around the practice areas related to the compliance challenges that were identified or desired to be looked at, and again, now we're looking more holistically at the process around that particular aspect. So just making those sorts of adjustments in order to really help these organizations succeed. We're at the home stretch, so in terms of lessons learned, I can share we are seeing some of the same outcomes that we've seen with VIP organizations saying, like, this is allowing more of a dialogue within their organization, that it's allowing cross-functional teams to work together better, that they're seeing more strategic thinking in the organization, improvements in their ability to estimate and plan work, or to make decisions and identify root cause issues.
Yeah, I think it's really, the ASC pilot has really been a fascinating activity because, anybody who's ever got a 43 or a warning letter, I mean, the air is out of the room, right? You got no space to do anything. You're consumed by that. So kudos to the pilot organizations who are unnamed here that jumped into that to say, oh, in addition to having to deal with that particular compliance issue, we're going to welcome people to come into our building and then also do a CMMI appraisal, right? But it's hard because now you're dealing with this pressure from the compliance side to address those issues that you've identified, and then you have these other people in there that are assessing you against a completely different set of criteria. Not completely different, but it's not 820 dot something. It's these best practices in the CMMI model. So it's often, it takes, I think, a little bit, we talked about once you get through an appraisal, you're ready to do an appraisal. It sometimes takes a little longer, I think, for those organizations to take that breath, to open up and see, oh, this feedback that you're giving us, it's not about just checking the box to correct that 820.100, the most popular issue in all warning letters for the last 25 years, that CAP issue, but you're giving us some holistic feedback about the entirety of the systems here. Maybe even stuff, as Cisco was talking about before, outside of the quality management system. And I think once the organizations turn the corner and realize that, I really believe that what we're going to learn from the ASC pilot is the CMI practices, be it for organizations that are in good compliance standing, organizations that might be struggling with some compliance issues, the feedback that they can get from that is potentially very valuable to them, depending upon how they choose to use it.
So Kim, is it true that the next generation of the models can include a make CAP a cool practice area?
It's make CAP a lit now, that's what the kids call it, right?
Well, we already have a practice area called incident resolution prevention, so I think that helps support already. But yeah, we are coming up on the next iteration of the model, and we do have new practice areas in there actually around data management and workforce management. So exciting stuff to come.
Okay. This is probably the next question, and Cisco, you get at least half the questions. I'll start with Cisco and just then go to everybody on the panel, just because we all have different perspectives. But what are your expectations for the future of VIP? And maybe if you think out the next couple of years, what do you either expect or what would you like to see as the program continues to mature?
I think that's a stellar question. I think there's a lot that can be achieved from my personal perspective, and I tried to hit on some of that beforehand, right? We know there's value here. How do we take VIP and what's able to do and maybe set up a small company or a startup to succeed, right? Right from the very beginning. A lot of them, nothing wrong with it, but a lot of the larger manufacturers, they kind of build by acquisition, right? And some of the biggest surprise is often what's happening with the product or the system once they get in the company. But if they can be set up to succeed right from the very beginning, that lowers that risk down, I think, for everyone collectively. So building onto that portion. But the other piece, and I think this is where the true value of the collaboration has come together, right? The companies themselves know where their next need are, right? Where are their biggest pain points? And for example, supply resilience has been a big issue. We didn't have to say, hey, companies, let's figure out how to look and target your supply resiliency space. Everybody said, you know what we need to tackle next? Supply resilience. And that is from an FDA standpoint, what we want to see, right? You guys know where you need to go. You don't need to wait for us. You shouldn't wait for us. If you're going to wait for us, you're going to be behind the curve most of the time. Take those steps, move forward. And I think, building on that idea of, some self-direction and continuing to build on that is where I think VIP has a lot more potential to continue to grow. The idea of the flexibilities, we've talked a lot about that here. One of the things that we learned really early on that drove the even consideration of how we offer some flexibility was because we learned that the system, just the way the process operates, was slowing down process improvements at organizations. It wasn't because of the timeline of the regulatory review, it's just prioritization. Organizations just couldn't get the priorities to put all these potential little improvements in place. And we've seen that has had a huge impact in a lot of organizations, the ability to kind of cycle through and get most of the improvements in place that seemed like it was nothing, at least within the scale of everything else the organization was dealing with. But once they got it through in a few days and got the priority to do that, it made a bigger impact. Freed up resources for something else, or improved the process here, dramatically increased production and yield. We saw some of that during the COVID pieces where, just a simple change helped them improve production and increase capacity in that sense. So the idea of how do we keep building on that, right? Understanding that these small improvements, especially for product that's already out there, it doesn't matter what type of product it is, has a big impact. And we as an agency are willing to find a way to kind of leverage the information we're getting here, the commitment, the trust, the transparency that companies are sharing to move some of these barriers, hurdles, or kind of resistance points that you're seeing to get this product improved and on the market, especially for companies who are willing to do the right thing. We need to figure out how to build on that to help drive broader expansion and adoption of the program.
Right. Okay, Kim, from the Osaka perspective, what are your thoughts on expectations and what you'd like to see next or focused on?
Yeah, I think for Osaka, one of our big next steps is really honing in on scaling the program, our scalability. We're working on an e-learning version of the training right now. For example, one of the things we learned early in the program is that leveraging internal appraisal team members from within the organization really helped with translating organizational nuances to the appraisal team, uncovering more information than we would have otherwise, and really having someone in the organization who understands the model well enough to help drive improvements in the months after the appraisal. It's been really effective for a lot of organizations, and in fact, I think most organizations are now taking advantage of having someone be trained in the model for supporting the appraisal and program participation. So finding out how we can scale training for those individuals, how we can scale our appraisers, continue to bring in more medical device context. To Cisco's point, I think we're working with the various working groups in VIP to try to understand what other regulatory opportunities might help get the improvements to patients faster and encourage broader adoption. And then something else kind of more aspirational might be around seeing how we can expand this program beyond the US. I know in the early days, we were hearing, for example, lots of improvements to products were going through the European market much faster than in the US, which was one of the things we wanted to address to get those improvements through here faster. But now we're hearing the reverse, is that they're getting through the US much faster and they're lagging in European markets. So it still creates the issue of maybe having to have multiple versions of the same product going out to different markets. So is there a way we can reach out to other agencies and share the value that we've learned as sort of an aspirational long-term next step?
All right, from our industry, Mark, what would you like to see, or what are your thoughts?
That just triggered me on international markets. If the same kind of program would work for MD-SAP from a compliance point of view, once you're good, that'd be great. Because for me, for Innovize, it's really nice that I get the nice benefit I don't have an FDA inspection, but I don't have MDSAP because I don't sell products directly. So most organizations still do MDSAP. But I think the international community would really, the international regulators, if they saw more examples of how this process works and how it's really affecting manufacturers, and these manufacturers are, I'm assuming there's how many international assessments are being done right now anyway. So that would be, I think, a real help is, systemically, because, the organization, a lot of medical device manufacturers like, yeah, I'm doing this in the US, but it doesn't affect my European submission, it doesn't affect my Japan submissions and stuff like that. So I think that's a really interesting concept to focus on that. And also, as a contract manufacturer, Cisco and I have talked, is like, what are the benefits can a contract manufacturer have, even though because we don't do the submissions themselves. So, but we've talked about different concepts there that, any other benefits that could help get more contract manufacturers in the business too, because then that will help, finished medical device manufacturers, so.
Cindy, how about your perspective? What would you like to see, or what areas do you think the program can continue to expand on?
Yeah, so I think MDSAP was my first thought too, for the same reason. That was the one that jumped to my head when you were talking. So that definitely is a key thing for, I think, most manufacturers doing that. But also, I think with the CMMI model, you've been adding different practices over time, which I think is important because you got to stay current with where industry, there's things coming up with cybersecurity is now a big thing, things like that. So you got to stay ahead of that. And I think that's important that we continue that mode and kind of add different practices to help us with that area. And then I think the other thing is just additional benefits to help speed to market in the US, or some of the things around like real-time reviews or 510Ks and some of the other areas of submission types that companies deal with would be helpful.
Brian, how about your thoughts?
Yeah, probably much the same as Cindy, really. Where we can get products out to market, certainly safely and effectively, but to do that more efficiently, I think perhaps there's some gains to be made there. I think we do need to be a bit cautious around some of the incentives that are provided to make sure we encourage organizations to be in the program for the right reasons. But there might be some gains to be made there. And so, I mean, there's synergies beyond, to get the product out. We've got checkpoints, and part of the process is, our involvement with the FDA for market access. So there's some opportunities that I think we look at the kind of the whole process to make sure that we're getting the waste out of that process. Internally, I think we're in year 4/5, but it still feels like we're just getting going. Because now we got the momentum, but we're looking at a lot of stuff, and there's still a lot more to kind of have a look at. So, I think even after year 4 or 5, we're still kind of newbies.
Okay. Ravi, how about you? What are your expectations or thoughts moving forward?
I see a very bright future for this program. I'm really passionate about it. But I think to really scale this program, I look at the demographics of our industry, and it's mostly small and medium-sized as opposed to large size. I forget the exact breakup. I think it's 80-20 or something like that. And so to really scale this, we're going to have to take this program beyond the large companies. And so that's kind of why we're focusing on getting sort of a theme going here, even at this summit, to see what can we do to get that. So from a futuristic perspective, I'd like to see us succeed in that. The other area that I think about is software. So when I think about CMMI, I actually first got trained in CMMI for software, and it was the foundation for CMMI, and a lot of software companies adopted it. And I'm thinking that quality defects really arise a lot more out of software, and these days even more and more out of software. So when we talk about practice areas and such, just drawing from the richness of the CMMI legacy on the software side and enriching that on the medical device side, I think is something that would be very, very valuable. I could go on and on, but the one thing that I really want to also, I hope, will materialize is the expansion of this program and its adoption even within the multiple regulatory agencies and within the branches of the regulatory agencies that we deal with. How can we expand this so that it's adopted more unilaterally, more universally within the FDA, within other organizations, and to Kim's excellent point about going abroad to Europe and so on, how can we integrate that with the MDSAP, even with the IBDR, MDR paradigms to truly have organizations come to the understanding that this program pays for itself, as opposed to being lured by a variety of incentives that then drive behaviors in a certain way, not necessarily always the correct way, because we want the program to be self-sustaining. And so is there an ROI from the program inherently? If we can show that and the companies come to the understanding that there is, then I think the program will be at a point where it'll be totally self-sustainable, because it's going to be driven by business drivers, not just other drivers. So those are a few thoughts I had on that, Rob.
Rob, you've been involved in the program for, what, 6 years? Coming up on 7 years?
Coming up on 7 years.
What's your opinion on where you think you'd like to see it go?
Well, I think, so I agree with Ravi in that I'd like to see essentially more companies get engaged. I mean, I think what we've just discussed here is, for those of us that have been involved for a long time, the process works well, it's flexible, and it continues to provide us the feedback. So for companies that are interested in continuous improvement, and really any organization that wants to be viable long-term should always understand where its weaknesses are and where its opportunities are to improve either business practices, quality practices, culture. It runs a wide gamut, and the appraisal model really fits most of those situations if it's, planned out well. And so, I'd really just like to see more participation for, the very important devices, products, et cetera, services that, support medical care in the United States. I think a lot of companies are not looking at it from the positive aspect of continuous improvement and change, and more just the barriers of trying to do something new and different.
Yeah, I think just kind of listening to this panel, I heard like 4 categories. If I were to encapsulate it, there might be more, but one, we heard within the agency, there was a digital pre-cert program that kind of came to its close, but it was also looking at trying to do some sort of assessment of organizations. So if they can demonstrate commitment to continuous improvement, they would potentially get some sort of pre-cert benefit. The white paper that came out in December said, hey, we're kind of constrained by what we have from a regulatory authority perspective. So, but you hear like, hey, the agency's interested in doing this. You've also seen on the CEDAR side, there was QMM. So the agency's definitely doing a lot of things to try to assess the maturity or the capabilities of organizations. So I think there's a lot of opportunity, as you were saying, Robbie, across the agency. Hearing this morning, I mean, hey, we've done, Kim, I think I heard last week, we've done 365 appraisals to date. It's probably more than that now, especially if you had an ASC. Great. That's been a great experiment for the first 6-7 years. But I think there's a lot of opportunity for us also to consider other improvement models. MDSAP is potentially one of those, but you could talk about Baldrige, you could talk about Shingo, you could talk about any other number of things. The third one there then is, what are the regulatory flexibilities or benefits that we get from an organization being trusted in this particular program? And then, of course, I think the fourth area is, the VIP it's a program, so it's a product, it's a service unto itself. We have a lot of opportunity to also reflect on our own improvement of how we execute those particular things. So I think I would suggest we look at all 4 of those areas to scale the program, to improve the program, to make it more available to small and medium businesses, and to make it available to not just medical devices, but across the regulatory jurisdiction of the FDA.
If I could just add to that, I think you summarized that really, really well, George.
Thanks.
As you usually do. But there's one area, though.
I'll get you that beer later.
Thank you. One won't do it. But I was going to say there's another area that is very central to us as medical device manufacturers, and that is the clinical area. And there are specifics within that area that have come, I think, more to the forefront lately with MDR and IBDR that are not automatically present in the model today because it really has its origins in a different place. And so as we talk about expanding the elements, we should also consider how we are going to bring the clinical element in, because there's barely an agency now that will let us get a product in the market without making sure that it has gone through either a clinical trial or a trade trial or some sort of, in other words, getting the real world evidence concept embedded into that model. I just want to share that as a fifth dimension, if you will.
I agree.
Thank you.
Well done.
So Cisco, just adjacent to that, one thing that does come up, a lot of companies are either in combo devices or, certainly there's a lot of crossover between just the pure device space. Is there any talk to try and expand and or focus on, at least that next iterative expansion of scope, or is that problematic?
So it's not a question of it being problematic, right? It's the involvement and the, where is the need from some of our sister centers who are in that space, right? When you talk combo product, it's us in conjunction with something else. But I think, as George mentioned, what you hear is that there's already plans and engagement on those fronts to kind of develop something similar or move in that direction. And in that sense, we've got opportunities to work collaboratively internally to make sure we can come up with something maybe that meets everybody's needs and helps address, especially the space with the combo product session. And that's, now that there's a little bit more momentum around that in the other centers, that's something that we've actively reached out and tried to see if we can start coordinating. Where it'll end up, it's still early in the process, but there's definitely opportunity. And we have interest, and hopefully, it sounds like the sister centers also have interest in that engagement. So we'll definitely keep everybody posted on where that develops and goes. So it's, just we recognize it. And, I know that a lot of companies deal with us. It's not just a CDRH only thing, right? They've got to deal with the collective. And we will figure out a way to get there. I think the benefits that we've had is, again, data. Doing something very different to what the agency has done for a long time takes being able to prove that it has an impact in one of these, in the areas that we need to oversee and maintain. Thanks to, again, all the work people have done here, the transparency of the companies, the willingness to share, we have that data, especially over the last few years. There's a lot that we've learned and a lot that we can glean from that information, and we've been, at least internally, very open with it so that it helps shape some of that thinking as people are moving forward on their side.
So this next question's probably more for Kim and George, and I'll start with Kim. The success of VIP really does rely on expansion of the appraiser community. What are the activities going on, number one, to start to grow that capacity, but also what are the safeguards are in place to make sure appraisals are still done similarly, effectively, and with the same level of outcome?
Yeah, so I think I'll start with what we're doing today and then talk about ways that we're exploring how that might evolve. So today, all of our lead appraisers have at least 10 years of experience in developing a product of some sort. They have to go through multiple rounds of training, starting with an introductory training, then kind of domain-specific training. They go through an intermediate training, an advanced training, and then they go through an observation process. So there's a lot of sort of safeguards there. There's assessments to make sure that they are learning the information, that they understand the information, and that they can actually apply it into a real-world setting. And then after they go through that process, they actually then need to apply to join this program. And so we go through an interview with them. We go through an additional round of training around the nuances and the tailoring that we've applied to the framework and the approach for the medical device space. And then we put them through another round of observation in this program. And in addition to all of that, we have standardized tools, templates, guidelines that we provide to all of our lead appraisers as well as our team members, so that they can understand the nuances, best practices, what's required, what's an option to flex in or flex out for organizations, what we've learned are, are effective or ineffective approaches, especially varying depending on, language barriers or multi-site, time zones, whether it's virtual, on-site, or some sort of hybrid. And then we also do a quality review of every appraisal to make sure that the lead appraiser adhered to our multi-hundred-page method definition document, which is sort of like our compliance textbook for appraisers. So all of those things are in place today to assure that the quality of our appraisers and their appraisal services in the program. Now, that's a long line of steps to get to the point where you can be a lead appraiser in the program, and we recognize that. It takes a long time, generally around 2 years to become a lead appraiser in CMMI, and then maybe another year after that to become a lead appraiser in MDAP, which is the program being used by VIP. And so we're looking at ways to streamline that process. Are there ways that we can combine this training for someone who's maybe coming in with the intention of participating in the program? Can we bring in people who specifically have medical device knowledge or expertise from the get-go so that there's less onboarding required to enter this space? Is there a way that we can provide more on-the-job training to gain some of that experience rather than requiring it all up front? And sort of how do all of these proposals impact quality? So we're sort of exploring multiple opportunities for how we can scale our appraiser community. Even looking at how many appraisals can be delivered within a year and still maintain a level of quality. So all sorts of things from that end.
So what you're telling me is George is very well vetted.
He is.
I'll throw a question, though. When we started this program, the idea of having an internal appraisal team member, people were like, whoa, no, you can't do that, right? That's insider baseball. And as you discussed earlier, Kim, we recognize that having an internal appraisal team member or members is often very valuable to the appraisal team. And the entire idea of that they were going to cover for the organization, I can tell you that it's typically the opposite. They're like, oh no, come and look in this closet over here, right? But seriously, it's very valuable for the organization to have that because the person can help translate maybe the alphabet soup of that organization, and they're also there for the organization to help interpret those results over time. So the idea that, this is not a good idea, shifted, I think probably after our first year of doing the program.
Yeah.
I'm curious, Cisco and Kim, what would you think of an organization maybe at some point having their own appraisal team lead if they met the qualifications of that? Would that be something that you'd be open to from the agency perspective?
So I think one thing that we've voiced throughout this whole journey is because it is about that continuous improvement portion, we're open to quite a lot. And in that example, when it was first brought up, it was also brought to our attention whether or not the FDA was going to be okay with this.
Yeah.
All we did was stipulate, here are the ground rules we need to maintain, right? Here's what we need to see out of this to guarantee some degree of independence through this. Now let's try it out and see what comes out of it. So even within that space, there's ways to get it done that will still meet our need, and we're open to that opportunity and a way to look at it, right?
Sure.
Yeah, I'd say from ISACA's perspective, I think we're also open to that. Especially, they're individuals who are coming in with a lot of that existing background experience. A lot of team members are from the engineering side or from the quality side, but they're familiar with the production workflow. And so we think that could be another opportunity. We also require that all appraisal teams have at least 50% of the team members be outside of the organization, so that helps maintain a level of objectivity. We think that could still be maintained. Although, to Cisco's point, we'd have to revisit some of those ground rules. Maybe, a lead appraiser from an organization couldn't appraise their own organization or any unit within their organization that they have direct reports in or they've contributed to the work. So finding out what those guardrails are to make sure that we maintain objectivity and quality.
Okay, just a reminder for folks online or the room here, there is a microphone over there if there are any other outside questions. Otherwise, we'll continue on with whatever I make up next with 12 minutes.
I will tell you that that whole internal lead appraiser solution, because it was part of addressing, again, a very quick, when we first started this, we put some very strict ground rules on the appraisal team and what could be done, and realized very quickly that we had really limited the scope of what we had available to us. But again, that was a solution that came out from the collective that met our needs, and thanks to the very gracious organizations who have allowed us to even participate on the appraisals to see and observe. Yeah, I can 100% agree. They are much harder on the organization than even we would be from an FDA standpoint. And there's some times we're sitting there, I'm like, wow, really? I would have let that go. That's not a big deal, huh?
I think that being said, there has to be some balance in that, the internal appraisers clearly bring a whole lot of value from the internal perspective, but then we also have to be sensitive to pressures that they might have from within the organization, given that they are employees of the organization, and that their futures to some extent depend on the outcomes from the assessment. So there has to be a balance. And so even if it was to be flipped and you had a lead appraiser from the inside, you may still have an observer, a very independent observer from the outside, who may have a certain veto power if they see that certain things go in the wrong way. Because this process, for those of us that haven't gone through it, is a very open and transparent process, and it relies a lot on feedback from employees. Me and my directors have literally been, I'm going to use the word thrown out of the room, so you guys can leave now. We're just going to talk to your people. And so there's a reason for that, and that is the openness that is, the feedback that comes from that openness. And if that were to somehow get contaminated or somehow, compromised is the right word, I think, because people that were asking the questions might be hesitant on their own, which external appraisers wouldn't be, that would be a compromise that we couldn't deal with. So I think there's going to be a balance, and as long as we set it up just the way you described it, Kim, that would work. And I'm okay with flipping it too, but I think that we'd have to have someone with pretty strong veto powers that would say that we're now saying time out, because we're not seeing this going the right way. So I want to add that perspective in as well.
Looks like we got a question in the back.
So this is actually aligned with what you guys were talking about. I want to lighten it up just maybe a tiny bit.
Oh, too serious.
As an external person who's going in and assessing, what's the most surprising thing or interesting thing that you've come up with as part of your appraisals? Like what have you walked away with and gone, oh my God, or wow, that's great? Negative or positive, either.
Somebody asked me what slightly different variation of that question, Jackie. What if I enjoyed this? And I feel, I know this may sound a bit cliche, but I feel really privileged that the doors of these organizations are open to me whenever I go into them, and I have the opportunity to learn about gamma sterilization or X-ray sterilization, or at Edwards, heart valves being created and replaced, and seeing how organizations will bring people in that have actually had their heart valve replaced into those line workers to connect them up with that, so they truly understand that impact from a quality perspective. I get to go to school every week, right? And it's a wonderful thing. So the surprising stories of all of that are just, again, it's cliches. The commitment by all of these organizations, the direct line worker labor, if you want to call them that, or associates, as they're called in some organizations, up to the leader level, that commitment there is to impacting people's lives. And a lot of those folks, they are making those products as if they're putting it in their spouse, their child, their parent. I've kind of teared up on occasion with it, right? So, and my payment in return for that is to hopefully provide some sort of value back to that organization so that they can continue to improve performance. Are there funny stories along the way? Yeah, but I'm going to keep that non-attributable, Jackie.
I didn't ask for company names. I just, if there's anything that have you seen anything that's been particularly troubling?
Well, I think, and Cisco hit on this before, I think, and this is probably true in all your organizations, you have a quality system. And what's in that quality system, you treat like a gold vault box. It's well managed, it's super controlled. If there's a change that needs to be made, to the to the inch, to the millimeter, the nanometer, what's that about? But as soon as we get out of the quality system, it's often the Wild West. We're not talking about anything under configuration management over there. We're not talking about measures of those particular processes over there. And those are often the lifeblood of an organization. Those continuous improvement projects that might be outside of your Kappa system. Those particular PowerPoint decks in Word documents that are outside of your configuration management system. So I mean, that's kind of troubling to me that we have put a quality management system as just this bullseye when you should be thinking about it more as maybe a business performance system instead.
Yeah, that's a great point.
I think
I'll get you one later too, Jackie.
you know, we've seen situations, and it's not necessarily that we've been on site for it, but again, this is the nature of the way the program is operated. And again, not our rules. This was something developed collectively. And it's unfortunate. We've had a company or two where, appraisers will go in and almost immediately they will get the certain elements of the leadership pushing back or challenging, or it's it's not going the way it was intended. And it also goes to the discussion on the commitment that you hear from some of these companies when they get in, because when that's happening and the appraisers aren't able to move ahead, we've gotten a call. This is what's going to happen. It's not going anywhere. We get a chance to get on the phone, and suddenly everything starts to clear up. Not everything goes smoothly, not everything's perfect, but the idea of the collaboration is there, the sharing and the transparency, and truly the commitment from the companies who say, I'm really looking to do this, right? It's there, and we've seen that. Even if there's elements within that always then becomes an opportunity for improvement for the organization down the road.
I think.
Oh, go ahead, Cindy.
Okay, I was going to say, and just from my perspective, from a sponsor, supporting the program is, I do a lot of coaching to every single person that's going to be going in there saying, if you're not open, this isn't going to work. You have to talk to them. You have to be open, and they're going to toss their notes at the end, so it doesn't matter. So it's all in confidence. So just speak up, and if the information's useful, they use it. If it's not, they're not going to use it. So don't hesitate. You need to give your opinions. You need to speak up. You need to give your voice. And I kind of tell them a little bit about the practice area they're going to be doing too, because some of the terminology is different in the model than what it is in our industry. So I had to kind of coach, okay, this is what types of things they're going to be looking at in the area. So it does require a lot of, to be successful, you have to coach people ahead of time so they know what to expect going in and are open, because otherwise it just doesn't work.
Okay, so seems to me that openness and collaboration are really the key to effective continuous improvement. And I think that's a great way to wrap up our session. I'd like to thank everyone for participating and being willing to spend your time and share your thoughts. Thank you.
Okay.